A widow takes in an abandoned elderly couple, but the truth surprises everyone. The days seem to blend together, filled with routine chores, tending to her small garden, and taking care of the modest house she had once shared with him. She often walked through the narrow lanes of her town, greeting neighbors, helping wherever she could, and yet she could not shake the feeling of emptiness that settled deep in her chest. The house was peaceful, yes, but the silence was heavy, pressing down on her like an unseen weight. She missed conversation, laughter, even the small arguments she used to have with her husband about trivial matters. They had been gone, and only memories remained. On a particularly rainy evening, the sky dark with clouds and the rain tapping softly against the windows, Mira decided to go to the market. She pulled her shawl tightly around her shoulders and stepped out, feeling the chill of the wet air. The streets were nearly empty. Most people had already rushed home, escaping the damp cold. Mira moved carefully, her feet splashing in small puddles, carrying a basket in her hand for vegetables and daily supplies. She enjoyed the quiet, the gentle rhythm of the rain, and the smell of wet earth, which reminded her of childhood days in the countryside. As she was returning home, a movement by the roadside caught her attention. At first she thought it might be a stray dog seeking shelter, but then she saw them. An elderly man and woman were sitting huddled together under the small overhang of a closed shop, shivering, soaked to the bone, and looking utterly exhausted. Their clothes were thin and worn, with patches that had seen better days. Their shoes, if they could even be called shoes, were torn and mud-stained. The woman clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders, and the man hunched over, trying to shield her from the rain. They looked tired not just from the weather but from something far deeper, a weariness that came from years of hardship. Mira's heart tightened at the sight. Without thinking twice, she hurried toward them. "Please come with me," she said gently, holding out her hand. "You cannot stay here in this rain. You will catch a cold." The couple looked up at her, surprised and hesitant. Their eyes were wary, almost as if they had not expected kindness in a long time. The woman, Sushila, shook her head faintly. We cannot trouble you," she said softly, her voice thin and weak. The man, Raghanath, nodded silently, his face lined with years of struggle, but Mira was persistent. She knelt beside them, lowering her voice so it would not startle them. "You are not troubling me," she said firmly. "Everyone deserves shelter from the rain. Come, I will take care of you for tonight. You will be safe at my home." There was something in her tone, gentle but unwavering, that seemed to reach them. After a few moments of silence, Raghanath finally said, We have nowhere else to go." Mira smiled softly. "Then come with me. I will make tea and warm clothes for you. We will figure out the rest later." She helped them to their feet, steadying them with her hands. Their movements were slow and careful, each step seeming like a struggle, yet they managed to follow her to the small car she had parked nearby. The rain dripped from their hair and clothes, and Mira could see the fatigue etched into their expressions. As they drove home, the elderly couple remained quiet. Mira glanced at them in the rearview mirror, wondering about their story. She did not press, sensing that they would share in their own time. Her mind, however, was already busy planning. A warm fire, blankets, and simple food that could ease their hunger and exhaustion. When they reached her house, she helped them inside, guiding them carefully through the small porch and into the living room. She lit the heater and wrapped thick woolen blankets around them. She noticed how frail Sushila was, how Raghanath's hands trembled slightly as he held onto the chair. Mira went to the kitchen to make tea, the aroma of boiling water and herbs soon filling the air. When she returned with steaming cups, she found the couple huddled together on the sofa, their faces softened by the warmth. They took the tea with quiet gratitude, sipping slowly, as if savoring not just the drink but the safety it represented. Mira sat nearby, watching them, her heart filled with a mix of concern and curiosity. Who were they? How had they ended up on the roadside in the rain? She wanted to ask, but something told her that pressing for answers immediately might frighten them. The couple gradually began to relax in the presence of Mira's calm and kind energy. Sushila, her voice still weak, asked softly, Will we be safe here?" Mira reached over and gently held her hand. "Yes," she said, "you are safe here. Tonight you have a home." For the first time since they had been on the streets, a small smile appeared on their faces. Over the next few days, Mira faced the practical challenges of her decision. The couple could not perform many daily tasks, and she had to help them bathe, prepare food, and adjust to the routines of her house. She worried at times about space, about money, about what neighbors might think, but every glance at their grateful faces reassured her that she had done the right thing. She realized that sometimes kindness was not about planning or caution. It was about stepping forward when someone needed help, even if it disrupted your own life. The town soon began to notice the unusual arrangement. Some neighbors were curious, some skeptical, and some even critical. "Why would a widow take in strangers?" they whispered among themselves. But others admired Mira quietly, recognizing the generosity and courage it took to care for people she barely knew. Mira herself did not pay much attention to the gossip. She focused instead on the small, meaningful moments, helping Sushila hold a spoon to eat, guiding Raghunath as he tried to read a book with dim eyesight, or simply sharing a quiet conversation over a cup of tea in the evening. At night, Mira often sat alone after putting the couple to bed, reflecting on the events of the day. She thought about her husband, about her own loneliness, and about how unexpectedly fulfilling it was to care for others. There was a strange comfort in knowing that her life, once quiet and lonely, had now become connected to someone else's story. The couple might be strangers, but in their presence, her home felt alive again. The walls that had echoed with silence now carried whispers of gratitude, soft laughter, and the occasional sigh of relief. Even the rain seemed different now. On the first night, it had been cold and isolating. Now, with the couple inside, it sounded almost gentle, as if nature itself acknowledged the warmth and safety of her small home. Mira felt a surge of hope, something she had not felt in years. Perhaps life still had surprises to offer, she thought, and perhaps even strangers could become family in ways that were impossible to imagine. By the end of the week, a rhythm had begun to form. Mira adjusted her routines, and the elderly couple began to trust her more. They spoke in fragments about their lives, revealing glimpses of their past without going into full detail. Mira listened patiently, understanding that healing sometimes came slowly, that trust could not be rushed. And in this slow, careful unfolding, a bond began to grow, a bond built on compassion, patience, and shared humanity. The story of Mira taking in the elderly couple began to ripple through the town. Some neighbors still whispered doubts, while others offered small gestures of support, a basket of food, a warm blanket, or a friendly smile. Mira welcomed these gestures but remained focused on the couple, determined that they would feel secure and valued in her home. She understood something profound. Kindness was not always about recognition, but about the quiet impact it could have on someone's life. And so, life in Mira's home changed, subtly but profoundly. The quiet widow who had once walked alone through the streets now had companions, fragile and worn by life, yet dignified in their own way. The rain, the cold, the long lonely evenings, they all seemed smaller now, softened by the warmth of human connection. And although the couple had not yet revealed the full truth of who they were or how they had come to be abandoned, Mira sensed that the story would unfold in its own time. For now, it was enough that they were safe, that they were fed, and that they were not alone. And in this simple act of compassion, Mira discovered something she had not expected, that caring for others could heal the heart in ways that nothing else could. The silence of her home had been replaced with quiet chatter, soft laughter, and the gentle rhythm of life returning to its rightful place. The first part of this journey ended not with dramatic revelation, but with the small, everyday triumphs of kindness and trust, planting the seeds for what would become a story of human connection, resilience, and surprising truths waiting to be uncovered. Life at Mira's home had begun to find a gentle rhythm. The elderly couple, Raghanath and Sushila, though still cautious, were slowly settling in. Their faces, once clouded with uncertainty and fear, now carried the faintest glimmer of trust. Each day brought small victories, a warm meal eaten without hesitation, a conversation that lasted a little longer, a smile that lingered instead of fading away. Mira noticed all of these signs and felt a quiet satisfaction. Caring for them was no longer just an act of kindness. It had become a responsibility she embraced with her whole heart. The first challenge was adjusting their daily routines to her small home. Mira realized quickly that Raghanath had difficulty walking long distances, and that Sushila's arthritis made even simple tasks painful. Every morning, she would wake early, prepare soft foods that were easy to eat, and arrange the house to make it easier for them to move around. She cleared small obstacles, added a chair near the kitchen counter for Sushila to rest, and placed handrails where Raghanath needed extra support. The adjustments were minor, yet they made a huge difference in the couple's comfort and confidence. At first, they were hesitant to accept her help. When Mira suggested a warm bath, Sushila shook her head, embarrassed. "I can manage," she murmured, her eyes avoiding Mira's gaze, but Mira was patient. She spoke softly, explaining that there was no shame in accepting help and that everyone deserved care, especially in old age. Slowly, the couple began to trust her guidance. The first bath, supervised by Mira, was cautious and quiet, but afterward, Sushila looked at her with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with genuine appreciation. Meals became another source of connection. Mira learned what they liked and disliked, preparing simple dishes with care. She discovered that Raghanath had once loved spicy food but now preferred milder flavors, while Sushila enjoyed soft rice dishes that were easy on her joints. Mira would sit with them during meals, making gentle conversation, asking about small memories or favorite foods from their past. They responded cautiously at first, hesitant to share too much, but the warmth in Mira's voice and the comfort of a safe home slowly drew them out. Outside the home, life in the town continued as usual, but whispers about Mira's guests had begun to spread. Some neighbors were curious, stopping by to ask why she had taken in the elderly couple. "Why would a widow take strangers into her home?" they would murmur. Others, however, admired her courage quietly, seeing her act of kindness as rare in a world that often seemed cold and uncaring. Mira did not engage with the gossip. She focused instead on the people in front of her, her heart set on helping them feel safe and valued. Despite the progress, challenges arose. Raghanath's eyesight was worsening, and he struggled to read even the simplest of signs. Sushila's hands, stiff and swollen, made it difficult for her to manage small tasks such as buttoning clothes or holding a cup steadily. Mira spent hours learning the small techniques to help them. How to guide Raghanath without making him feel helpless. How to hold Sushila's hands gently while assisting with daily chores. How to make small adjustments that would give them dignity rather than dependency. It was exhausting work, both physically and emotionally, but Mira never complained. She understood that patience was a form of love, and love often required effort. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between them grew stronger. The couple began to open up, sharing small details of their lives, their routines, and the places they had once called home. Mira listened with interest and empathy, never pressing for information they were not ready to give. There were moments of laughter too, simple, quiet moments when Sushila would recall a funny incident from years ago, or when Raghunath mispronounced a word in his attempt to tell a story. These moments, though fleeting, filled the house with warmth and began to erase the tension that had once clung to their presence. Mira also noticed the dignity that remained in both of them despite their hardships. They carried themselves with quiet pride, even in their current vulnerable state. Raghunath, though frail, would straighten his back when speaking, and Sushila would insist on doing small tasks herself, refusing to be treated as weak. Mira admired this strength and made sure to encourage it, praising them for their efforts and ensuring they felt respected in every interaction. During quiet evenings, Mira would sit by the window, the elderly couple nearby, and watch the rain or the sunset. She realized that life had become fuller in ways she had never imagined. Though caring for them was not easy, it had given her purpose and a renewed sense of connection. She thought about how loneliness had felt unbearable before, yet now, even amidst challenges and fatigue, her heart felt lighter. There was a sense of shared life, of mutual dependence, and of quiet companionship that brought a kind of joy she had almost forgotten. Occasionally, the couple's hesitation and shyness revealed the depth of their experiences. Sushila would glance at photographs or old household items with a distant look in her eyes, as if remembering someone or something she could not speak of. Raghunath would sometimes pause mid-sentence, lost in thought, before returning to the conversation with a faint smile. Mira sensed that there was more to their story, something they were not ready to share yet. She did not press but remained attentive, offering gentle questions and patient listening whenever they were willing to speak. The local children began to notice the elderly couple as well. They would sometimes peek through the windows, curious about the strangers living with Mira. Initially, Raghunath and Sushila were shy around the children, unsure how to interact. But over time, small gestures, a smile, a soft word, a shared piece of fruit began to bridge the gap. The children's laughter brought lightness to the house, and the couple gradually learned to enjoy their presence. Mira watched these interactions with quiet happiness, realizing that healing could come not just from care and shelter, but also from connection with others. Mira also faced practical difficulties. Her small home was not large enough to accommodate extra guests comfortably, and sometimes resources were tight. She had to budget carefully, prioritize meals, and adjust her own routine to meet the couple's needs. Yet, she never let these challenges deter her. Every difficulty was a small sacrifice she was willing to make for the well-being of Raghunath and Sushila. Each obstacle overcame strengthened the bond between them, as the couple recognized her dedication and responded with gratitude and trust. Slowly, the town began to respond to Mira's quiet act of kindness. Some neighbors offered small contributions, a basket of vegetables, warm blankets, or homemade food. Others volunteered advice or assistance, though always with polite respect for her decisions. Even those who had been skeptical at first began to soften, seeing that the couple was not just surviving but gradually thriving in the warmth of Mira's home. Her act, simple as it seemed, was slowly creating a ripple effect, reminding people that compassion could transform lives. At night, Mira often reflected on these changes. She thought about the paths that had led the couple to her doorstep, about the hardships they had endured, and about the quiet resilience they carried within them. She wondered what stories they might tell, what secrets lay hidden behind their gentle smiles. And yet, she understood that the journey would unfold naturally, in its own time, and that her role was to provide a safe space where trust and openness could grow. By the end of the month, Raghunath and Sushila had begun to feel more at home. They no longer flinched at small sounds or hesitated at simple tasks. They began to laugh softly, to share small memories, and to interact with the children and neighbors with a cautious openness. Mira felt a quiet pride in these changes, knowing that the couple's adjustment was not just a result of her efforts, but also of their own courage and willingness to trust. Mira's days remained full and sometimes exhausting, but there was a profound sense of fulfillment in her life now. She had discovered that kindness was not a passive act. It required patience, effort, and emotional investment. And yet the rewards were beyond measure: smiles, laughter, gratitude, and the quiet joy of seeing someone regain hope and dignity. Her home, once silent and empty, had become a place of warmth, care, and shared humanity. Evenings were often the most reflective times. Mira would sit quietly while Raghanath read an old newspaper, occasionally asking questions about the stories, or Sushila hummed a soft tune she remembered from long ago. The three of them would share tea, exchanging small anecdotes or memories of past days. The companionship was comforting, a gentle balm for the wounds of loneliness and hardship that each of them carried. In these moments, Mira realized that home was not just a place, but the people who filled it with care and connection. And though the full story of why Raghanath and Sushila had ended up abandoned had not yet been revealed, Mira sensed that patience and continued kindness would eventually bring the truth to light. For now, it was enough that they were safe, fed, and slowly learning to trust again. The foundation of a deep, lasting bond had been laid, built on respect, empathy, and shared life experiences. Mira had entered this situation expecting nothing more than to offer temporary shelter. Yet, as the days passed, she realized that this simple act had changed her life as much as it had changed theirs. She had gained purpose, companionship, and a renewed sense of meaning. Her heart, once heavy with grief and loneliness, now felt lighter, buoyed by the gentle presence of those she cared for. And so, life continued at Mira's home. Small routines, shared meals, quiet conversations, and acts of gentle care filled each day. The elderly couple, once strangers, were slowly becoming part of her life in ways she had never imagined. And with each passing day, the bond between them grew stronger, promising that the next chapters of their lives would be full of trust, warmth, and perhaps even surprising revelations that would touch the hearts of everyone around them. Life at Mira's house had begun to feel more settled, yet an air of quiet mystery lingered around the elderly couple. Raghanath and Sushila were slowly becoming more comfortable with their new home, yet there were moments when they seemed lost in thought, staring at walls, photographs, or even objects as if they carried memories too heavy to speak aloud. Mira noticed these glimpses of their past and often wondered what had happened to them before they appeared on her doorstep. At first, these signs were small and easy to overlook. Sushila would sometimes pause while dusting the shelves, her eyes fixed on an old vase, and Raghanath would trace his fingers along the edge of the furniture, muttering soft words that Mira couldn't quite catch. They spoke little about themselves, only answering basic questions politely and smiling gently when asked about their health or preferences. Yet Mira sensed that behind those smiles lay a history both proud and painful. One morning, as Mira prepared breakfast, she noticed Raghanath looking out the window at the narrow street. His hands were resting lightly on the sill, and his eyes had a faraway look, almost as if he were trying to remember something. "Do you recognize this street?" Mira asked cautiously, not wanting to intrude but curious about his sudden quietness. Raghanath shook his head slowly, then nodded, unsure himself. "I think I have seen it before," he said softly. His voice carried a mix of uncertainty and nostalgia, leaving Mira both intrigued and concerned. Sushila, meanwhile, had begun noticing the small changes in the town. She would comment on shops, old buildings, or people who passed by. Sometimes she would pause mid-step, staring at a window or doorway, her lips moving as if she were reading words that weren't there. Mira found these moments puzzling but did not press. Instead, she offered gentle attention, helping them feel secure while leaving space for their memories to surface naturally. The town itself had begun to take notice of the elderly couple's presence. Children would sometimes peek curiously from behind gates, whispering to their friends about the strange new guests at Mira's house. Some neighbors were skeptical, others sympathetic. They must have had a life before this, an older woman remarked to her friend. Look at the way they carry themselves. They are not ordinary people. Mira overheard such comments but never engaged in the gossip. She knew that understanding and compassion were more valuable than assumptions. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Mira asked Raghunath to help her organize some old boxes in the storeroom. He moved carefully, leaning on a cane, but seemed determined. While sorting through the boxes, he paused suddenly, holding a yellowed envelope in his hand. "This seems familiar," he murmured. Mira watched him quietly as he opened it, revealing faded documents, letters, and photographs. His eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed transported to another time, another life. Sushila approached, drawn by the sudden tension. She glanced at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. I remember this," she whispered, though her voice was barely audible. The documents appeared to be legal papers, old certificates, and letters addressed to a prominent couple in the town. Mira's curiosity grew, but she remained calm, sensing that the couple might not yet be ready to explain fully. The days that followed were filled with small discoveries and quiet moments of reflection. Mira noticed that Raghunath had an unusual knowledge of the town's old maps, streets, and buildings. He would point to locations with precision, recounting details that did not align with his supposed modest past. Sushila, too, displayed knowledge and skills that seemed unexpected for someone who had lived a life of hardship alone. They could sew delicate patterns, recall events and people long forgotten, and speak with a quiet authority that commanded respect without demanding it. Yet they were cautious about revealing too much. Whenever Mira asked about their past, they would smile and deflect the question. "Some things are better left in memory," Raghunath would say gently. Sushila would nod, adding, "We have been forgotten before. We must be careful now." Mira understood the weight behind their words. She realized that this couple had faced hardships that went beyond what any stranger could imagine. Their pride and dignity had survived the trials of life, even as circumstances had forced them into poverty and anonymity. Despite their reticence, small moments of warmth and humor began to emerge. One morning, Sushila insisted on helping Mira make breakfast despite her stiff hands. As she struggled with the utensils, Mira laughed softly. "Careful, Sushila, you might drop the eggs," she said. Sushila chuckled, a soft, musical sound that filled the kitchen. "I have dropped more than eggs in my life," she replied wryly, and for a moment the room was filled with laughter. These small glimpses of joy reminded Mira that even in the shadow of hardship, life still held moments of beauty. Raghunath, too, had his own way of participating. He would spend hours in the small garden, tending the plants with meticulous care. Mira noticed that he had a gentle touch, a deep understanding of each plant's needs. "These flowers remind me of a garden I once knew," he said one evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold. Sushila joined him, planting seeds carefully and arranging the pots. Together, they brought life and color to Mira's small backyard, and in turn, the garden became a symbol of renewal and hope. As the couple grew more comfortable, their interactions with neighbors and children slowly increased. At first, Raghunath and Sushila were shy and hesitant, retreating when someone approached. But over time, their quiet presence began to draw people in. Children would bring flowers or small gifts, and the couple would smile warmly, offering gentle words or sharing small stories from their past. The town began to see them not as strangers, but as dignified and gentle souls who had endured much but remained kind and patient. Despite these moments of connection, Mira could sense that the full truth of their past remained hidden. There were nights when Raghunath and Sushila would sit in the living room, speaking in low tones that she could not hear, or gaze at old photographs with wistful expressions. Their silence spoke volumes, hinting at experiences of loss, betrayal, and perhaps even injustice. Mira understood that patience was necessary. She could not force them to reveal what they were not ready to share. Her role was to provide stability, warmth, and trust, creating a safe space where they could eventually open up. One evening, Mira overheard a conversation between the couple that caught her attention. Raghunath said quietly, "Do you think anyone remembers us anymore?" Sushila replied, "Some do, but many have forgotten. We must be careful, Raghunath. We cannot trust easily." The words were spoken softly, yet they carried a weight that made Mira's heart ache. She realized that the couple had lived through experiences that had taught them caution, humility, and the value of trust. She felt an even deeper sense of responsibility to ensure they felt safe and respected. During these weeks, Mira also began to observe subtle routines and preferences that revealed more about their personalities. Raghunath enjoyed reading old newspapers and letters, often pausing to remark on historical events or local news with surprising insight. Sushila had a keen eye for order, noticing small details in the house that Mira had overlooked. Their contributions, though modest, made the household more lively and organized. Mira welcomed their input, understanding that involving them in daily life helped restore a sense of purpose and dignity that had likely been absent for years. The elderly couple also displayed an unexpected sense of humor. On rainy days, when the wind rattled the windows and the house seemed colder than usual, Sushila would tease Mira about the state of her cooking, or Raghunath would joke about how he could have done better. These light-hearted moments were precious, reminding Mira that even in the shadow of hardship, laughter could thrive. They created a rhythm of life where moments of tension and struggle were balanced by moments of warmth and connection. As Part 3 drew to a close, Mira felt a growing sense of anticipation. She knew that the couple's past was complex and full of untold stories. There were hints of mystery, familiarities with places, skills, and objects that did not fit their current circumstances. Yet she also recognized that revelation would come in its own time, when the couple felt safe enough to trust fully. Until then, she continued her gentle care, fostering trust, comfort, and a sense of belonging that had been absent from their lives for far too long. Life continued in this delicate balance. The town slowly adjusted to the presence of the elderly couple, the children played more openly around them, and Mira's home had become a place of warmth and security. Yet the sense of mystery remained, keeping both Mira and the audience curious. Who were Raghunath and Sushila really? What had led them to this stage of life, abandoned and vulnerable? The answers would come, but for now, the story rested in moments of patience, kindness, and the slow, unfolding trust between strangers brought together by fate. Life at Mira's home had settled into a rhythm, yet there was a quiet tension that lingered in the air. Raghunath and Sushila had grown comfortable with their new routine, but glimpses of their past occasionally surfaced, hinting at stories they had kept hidden for years. Mira, patient and observant, noticed these subtle moments, the lingering gaze at an old photograph, a half-spoken memory, or the way Raghunath paused when a familiar street name came up in conversation. She did not press, but a curiosity grew within her, a quiet longing to understand the full truth about the couple she had come to care for so deeply. One morning, as the sun filtered gently through the curtains, Mira asked Raghunath if he would help her clean out the old storage room. He agreed with a nod, leaning on his cane as they moved boxes and old furniture. The room was dusty and dimly lit, filled with forgotten items that had been pushed aside for years. As they shifted a stack of old papers, Raghunath's hand paused on a worn, yellow envelope. He looked at it with a mixture of recognition and hesitation, then slowly opened it. Mira watched quietly, giving him space as he unfolded the contents. Inside were letters, legal documents, and faded photographs. Raghunath's eyes widened as he scanned the papers, and for the first time, Mira noticed a flicker of emotion, shock, nostalgia, and something unspoken. Sushila entered the room, drawn by the movement, and her hand instinctively reached for the papers. Her fingers trembled as she held a photograph of a younger couple smiling confidently in front of a large house. I remember this," she whispered, her voice fragile yet filled with weight. Mira felt her heart quicken. This was the moment she had sensed would come, though she had not expected it so soon. "Do you want to tell me about it?" she asked softly, careful not to push too hard. Sushila nodded slowly, then looked at Raghunath for reassurance. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, and together they began to speak. Raghunath's voice was steady but quiet, carrying a calm authority that Mira had not noticed before. He told her that they had once been well-known and respected members of the town. They had owned businesses, contributed to charitable causes, and were regarded with admiration by friends and neighbors. Their lives had been full of success and recognition, marked by responsibility, dignity, and care for others. Yet, as Raghunath explained, life had a way of testing even the strongest hearts. A trusted business partner had betrayed them, taking advantage of their trust and driving them into financial ruin. Their reputation had suffered, and they had lost not only wealth but also the respect and support of some who had once been close to them. "We had to leave everything behind," Raghunath said, his voice tinged with sorrow. "Our home, our friends, everything we knew. We had nothing, and the world seemed to have forgotten us." Sushila's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she added, "We tried to survive quietly without asking for help, but life was harsh, and we became invisible to everyone except each other." Mira listened in silence, her heart aching for the couple who had endured so much. She realized that their reluctance to speak about the past had not been stubbornness or pride, but a shield formed from years of pain and betrayal. They had been forced to live humbly, hiding the truth of their lives from the world, simply to protect themselves from further harm. And yet, despite everything, they had maintained their dignity, their patience, and their ability to care for others. Over the next few days, the revelation slowly began to change the atmosphere in Mira's home. Raghunath and Sushila felt a sense of relief in sharing their story, and Mira's unwavering support provided a safe space for them to process long-held emotions. She encouraged them gently, reminding them that their past did not define their present, and that the kindness they had received could be the first step toward a new chapter in their lives. The documents and letters they had uncovered told stories of generosity, community involvement, and resilience. One letter described a time when Raghunath had helped a struggling farmer save his land, while another detailed Sushila's efforts to organize educational programs for children in the town. These were not just ordinary people who had been abandoned. They were individuals who had once made meaningful contributions to their community, yet circumstances had forced them into obscurity. Mira realized that the surprise she had sensed from the beginning was far greater than she had imagined. The town, which had seen them as helpless and abandoned, had no idea of the lives they had once led. She decided that once the couple felt ready, their story should be shared, not as a spectacle, but as a testament to resilience, kindness, and the strength of the human spirit. Meanwhile, the elderly couple began to regain confidence in small ways. Raghunath started spending time in the garden again, arranging plants and recalling his love for nature, which had been a lifelong passion. Sushila took up small sewing projects, mending clothes for Mira and herself, and occasionally creating simple decorations for the house. Their skills, once forgotten in the struggle for survival, began to shine again, reminding them, and Mira, that life had more to offer than mere endurance. Neighbors began to notice the subtle changes too. Raghunatha and Sushila moved with more purpose, spoke with calm assurance, and even offered small advice or assistance to those around them. The town's perception began to shift, slowly but surely. People who had once whispered doubts now offered gestures of respect, a warm meal, an invitation to a small gathering, or simply a nod of recognition. Mira observed these changes with quiet satisfaction, knowing that kindness and patience could transform not just her household, but the broader community as well. The couple's interactions with children and younger neighbors also began to blossom. They shared stories of their past, carefully selected memories that highlighted resilience, compassion, and courage. The children listened with wide eyes, captivated by tales of generosity, friendship, and small triumphs in the face of adversity. These interactions brought laughter and light to the home, and the couple began to experience a sense of purpose that had long been missing. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting golden light across the small garden, Raghunatha and Sushila sat with Mira on the porch. "We have been forgotten for so long," Raghunatha said quietly, "but you reminded us that there is still goodness in the world." Sushila nodded, her hand resting lightly on Mira's. "You did not judge us or ask for anything in return. You only offered care, and that care has given us hope again." Mira's eyes filled with warmth. She understood that the bond they shared was more than friendship. It was the quiet miracle of trust, compassion, and human connection. The next days were filled with small acts of restoration. Mira helped the couple contact distant relatives who had lost touch over the years. She assisted in organizing their important documents, ensuring that their past achievements and identity were preserved. Slowly, the couple began to reclaim parts of their former lives, not through wealth or status, but through recognition of who they truly were and the dignity they had always carried. The townspeople gradually became aware of the couple's story. Mira shared bits of information cautiously, highlighting their past contributions and the injustices they had faced. The surprise in the town was profound. People who had once whispered doubts now approached with respect and admiration. They realized that the couple they had assumed to be helpless were, in fact, individuals of remarkable character, resilience, and integrity. The revelation had an emotional impact not only on the town, but also on Mira herself. She had entered this situation expecting to offer temporary shelter, yet she had discovered a hidden depth of humanity and strength in the couple she cared for. Her life, once quiet and lonely, had been transformed into one filled with connection, purpose, and shared experience. The story of Raghunatha and Sushila became a living example of the power of kindness, the importance of empathy, and the enduring value of dignity. As Part 4 concluded, the atmosphere in Mira's home had shifted. The mystery of the couple's past had begun to unfold, revealing a story of injustice, resilience, and quiet heroism. Trust had been established, confidence restored, and hope rekindled. The stage was set for the next chapter, a chapter where the town, the couple, and Mira herself would come together to celebrate life, recognize contributions, and embrace the transformative power of compassion. The couple's journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, they looked to the future with a sense of possibility rather than fear. Mira, too, had grown through the experience, learning that acts of kindness could lead to profound change, not just for those who receive it, but also for those who give it freely. And as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the garden, there was a sense of quiet triumph, a promise that the story of Raghunatha, Sushila, and Mira would continue to unfold in ways both surprising and deeply meaningful. Life at Mira's home had changed in ways that she could never have imagined. The elderly couple, Raghunatha and Sushila, had slowly begun to reclaim parts of their past, yet their present had grown richer with trust, companionship, and the quiet joy of being cared for. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, a shelter from the rain, had transformed into something much deeper, a bond built on empathy, respect, and shared humanity. After the revelations of their past, Mira realized it was time to help the couple reconnect with the wider world. She wanted them to be recognized, not as victims of circumstance, but as the dignified, remarkable individuals they had always been. With gentle encouragement, Raghanath and Sushila agreed to meet a few old acquaintances they had lost contact with over the years. The process was slow, and they were nervous at first, uncertain how people would react after all these years. Mira accompanied them to each meeting, offering quiet support. The first encounter was with a former friend who had been involved in charitable work alongside them. The friend's eyes widened as he recognized them, and his face lit up with warmth. "Raghanath, Sushila, I thought I would never see you again," he exclaimed. The elderly couple smiled, a mixture of relief, surprise, and happiness crossing their faces. Tears were shed, hands were held, and old memories were shared. In that moment, the weight of years of neglect and hardship seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of belonging and acknowledgement. Word of their return spread quickly. Slowly, neighbors and members of the town began to approach Mira's home, curious about the couple who had once been unknown to them, now revealed as individuals of courage, generosity, and resilience. People came with small gestures of respect, a basket of flowers, a warm meal, or simply a smile and kind words. The change in the town's attitude was remarkable. Those who had once whispered doubts now openly praised the couple's strength and the compassion of Mira, who had given them safety and trust without asking for anything in return. The couple's confidence grew each day. Raghanath began visiting local gardens and community spaces, offering guidance based on his experience with horticulture and community planning. Sushila shared her knowledge of education and social initiatives, assisting with small projects and mentoring children in the neighborhood. They were not only returning to life but actively contributing, reminding everyone around them that dignity and skill do not fade, even when life becomes difficult. Mira watched these developments with quiet pride. The home she had opened to strangers had become a center of connection, warmth, and renewal. She saw the impact of her simple act of kindness ripple outward, touching not just the couple, but the wider community. It was a lesson she carried with her in every interaction, that small, compassionate actions could lead to profound change, far beyond what anyone might expect. Evenings at the house became filled with laughter and conversation. Neighbors would come to share tea and stories, children would run through the garden, and the elderly couple would participate with gentle amusement, offering advice or joining in playful interactions. The once quiet, lonely home now thrummed with life, warmth, and a sense of purpose. Each day brought new opportunities for connection, and each small moment of joy reinforced the importance of care, patience, and trust. The town's perception of Mira also shifted. People admired not only the couple's resilience, but also Mira's courage and generosity. She had taken a risk, opening her home to strangers, and in doing so had transformed the lives of those around her. Stories of her kindness began to circulate, inspiring others to act with empathy and thoughtfulness. It was a quiet revolution, a reminder that true leadership and influence do not always come from wealth or power, but from compassion and moral courage. Raghanath and Sushila, too, found a sense of purpose they had not felt in years. Raghanath took up the task of helping organize the town library, cataloging books, and teaching younger members of the community about history and nature. Sushila assisted with local education initiatives, sharing knowledge of literature, storytelling, and practical life skills. Their lives, once overshadowed by loss and isolation, were now full of meaningful activity, recognition, and connection. Mira continued to care for them, not as a servant or guardian, but as a friend and companion. She helped them with daily tasks when needed, but encouraged independence wherever possible. Meals were shared, conversations flowed freely, and quiet moments of reflection were welcomed. She realized that care was not simply about providing shelter or food. It was about fostering trust, supporting dignity, and creating an environment where people could flourish. The elderly couple's relationship with each other also deepened. Having survived hardship together, they found comfort in shared routines, laughter, and memories. Raghunath would often reminisce about moments of courage, generosity, and love from their past, while Sushila would gently tease him about the small mistakes they had made along the way. Their bond, tested by years of adversity, had grown stronger, and in the warmth of Mira's home, it became a source of inspiration for all who saw them. One afternoon, Mira suggested they host a small gathering for the neighbors who had supported them. The elderly couple was hesitant at first, modest and unaccustomed to attention, but with encouragement they agreed. The gathering was simple yet heartfelt. Neighbors brought small contributions, flowers, food, and gifts, while children performed small skits and songs. Raghunath and Sushila, once invisible and abandoned, were now honored guests, surrounded by people who recognized their value and contributions. Laughter, tears, and heartfelt conversations filled the room, and Mira felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Through these events, the couple also shared lessons from their past. They spoke of resilience in the face of betrayal, the importance of kindness even when the world seems harsh, and the power of hope to transform lives. Children listened in awe, neighbors nodded with respect, and Mira knew that the couple's story would be remembered for years as a testament to courage, humility, and human dignity. As the weeks passed, the elderly couple became an integral part of the community. They were invited to small town events, consulted for advice, and celebrated not for wealth or status, but for the character, wisdom, and resilience they embodied. Mira's role as their caretaker had transformed into a partnership of friendship and mutual respect. The bond they shared was no longer defined solely by need, but by love, trust, and shared life experiences. One evening, as the sun set over the town, casting a golden glow over the garden, the three of them sat together quietly. Raghunath held a small cup of tea, Sushila's hand rested lightly on his arm, and Mira watched them with warmth. "We have been given a second chance," Raghunath said softly, his eyes reflecting gratitude, "not just at life but at being remembered, at being seen." Sushila nodded. "And it is thanks to you, Mira. You gave us hope when we thought it was gone forever." Mira smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. The couple's transformation was complete not only in the eyes of the town but in their own hearts. They had moved from abandonment and invisibility to recognition, purpose, and renewed dignity. The story that had begun with hardship and secrecy had grown into one of redemption, community support, and the enduring impact of empathy. Mira reflected on the journey she had shared with them. She realized that the act of helping strangers had changed her as much as it had changed the couple. Her life, once quiet and solitary, was now filled with connection, laughter, and the satisfaction of making a profound difference. She understood that the smallest gestures of kindness could have the most remarkable consequences, reaching far beyond what one might ever expect. In the final weeks of the story, Mira, Raghunath, and Sushila began to plan small initiatives for the town. They organized workshops for children, community gardening days, and reading sessions for neighbors. The elderly couple's skills and experience enriched the town, while Mira's courage and empathy inspired others to act with generosity. Together, they became a living example of how compassion, trust, and human connection could rebuild lives, restore dignity, and strengthen communities. The story ended not with grand gestures or dramatic events, but with quiet triumph. Mira and the elderly couple shared laughter in the garden, enjoyed simple meals together, and participated in the life of the town as friends, mentors, and respected members. They had faced hardship, abandonment, and uncertainty, yet through patience, trust, and kindness, they had created a life full of purpose, connection, and hope. As the sun set one final time over the hills surrounding Mira's town, the three of them sat together, content in the warmth of their shared home. The town had learned a powerful lesson about compassion. The elderly couple had regained their dignity and place in the community, and Mira had discovered the quiet, transformative power of human kindness. Their lives, once defined by loneliness and struggle, were now full of connection, hope, and the promise of many happy days to come. And in that gentle evening light, there was a sense of completion, an ending that was also a beginning. For Raghunath, Sushila, and Mira, the story of care, trust, and unexpected friendship would continue, a testament to the enduring strength of the human heart.